The space station called Catherine Prime was the largest meeting place in the known galaxy. 12 different alien races came here to trade, to talk, and to fight. The fighting pits at the center of the station were famous. Warriors from across the stars came to test their strength and earn glory. The winners became legends. The losers became forgotten. When the human ship arrived at the station, no one paid much attention. The vessel was small and ugly compared to the elegant cruisers of the Deshans or the massive war barges of the Varax. It carried only a small group of diplomats who had come to discuss trade agreements. Humans were new to the galactic community. They had only discovered faster than light travel 50 years ago. Most species considered them children playing at being adults. Sergeant Marcus Cole stood at the back of the human delegation. He was not a diplomat. He was a Marine, assigned to protect the ambassador and her staff. He was 34 years old, with short brown hair and a face that had seen too many fights. His body was hard from years of training, but compared to the aliens around him, he looked soft and weak. The Varax towered over everyone in the trading hall. They were insect-like creatures, 8 feet tall, with shells as hard as steel and arms that ended in natural blades. Their eyes were black and empty, and they moved with a clicking sound that made Cole's skin crawl. The Deshans were even larger. They looked like dinosaurs that had learned to walk upright, with 4 arms and scales that shimmered like jewels. Each one weighed over 1,000 pounds of pure muscle. And then there were the Drakkar. Cole had only seen one, watching from a balcony high above the trading floor. The creature was 9 feet tall, covered in scales the color of dried blood. Its body was marked with hundreds of scars, each one a record of battle. Its body was battle. Its eyes were gold and ancient, and they seemed to see everything. Cole had asked his translator about the Drakkar on the balcony. The device had answered in a small, frightened voice. That was Ketharan the Unbroken, the apex warrior. He had won over 300 fights in the arena and had never lost. He had killed champions from every species in the galaxy. He was considered the greatest warrior alive. The trade negotiations went badly from the start. The Varax delegation did not want to share mining rights with newcomers. Their leader, a massive creature named Vortek, made it clear that he considered humans to be insects not worth his time. Ambassador Chun remained calm and professional. She explained humanity's position with patience and dignity. She offered fair terms and reasonable compromises. Vortek responded by spitting on the floor at her feet. The other delegations laughed. The sound echoed through the great hall like thunder. The Deshans rumbled with amusement. The smaller species chittered and clicked. Even the trade masters, who were supposed to remain neutral, allowed themselves small smiles. Cole felt his hands become fists at his sides. Ambassador Chun's face remained still. She was a diplomat. She had trained her whole life to swallow insults and keep talking. But Cole saw the hurt in her eyes. He saw the way her hands trembled slightly as she gathered her documents. Vortek leaned forward, his blade arms clicking together. He said something in his native language, and the translator rendered it as words Cole would never repeat. The insult was directed at the ambassador personally, at human females in general, and at the entire human species. The laughter grew louder. Cole stepped forward. The movement was small, but it drew every eye in the room. The human security officer, barely 6 feet tall, was walking toward the 8-foot Varax warrior. Ambassador Chun called his name, ordering him to stop. Cole did not hear her. Blood was pounding in his ears. His vision had narrowed to a single point. 20 years of military training screamed at him to stand down, to think tactically, to consider the consequences. He kept walking. Cole stopped 3 feet from Vortek and looked up at the alien. Up close, he could see his own reflection in those black eyes. He looked small. He looked weak. He looked like a man about to die. He did not care Cole spoke in a clear, steady voice. He demanded satisfaction through challenge combat. He invoked the ancient right that every species on the station recognized. He challenged Vortek to meet him in the arena. The silence that followed lasted for 5 heartbeats. Then the laughter started again, louder than before. Vortek's mandibles clicked together in what passed for a smile among his kind. He declined to fight such a weak opponent personally, but he offered one of his guards instead. A mid-level warrior named Chitrik would be more than enough to crush the human. The station's bookmakers set the odds at 47-1 against Cole. It was the highest spread they had ever offered. No one wanted to bet on the human. Eventually, a few gamblers placed small wagers on Cole, just for the novelty of a Ambassador Chun tried to talk Cole out of the fight. She explained that his death would set back human diplomacy by decades. She ordered him to withdraw the challenge. Cole refused. He told her that some things mattered more than diplomacy. He told her that humanity would never earn respect by accepting insults in silence. He told her that someone had to stand up. The ambassador looked at him for a long time. Then she nodded slowly and wished him luck. That night, Cole sat alone in his quarters and thought about what he had done. He had signed his own death warrant. He knew that Varak's warriors were faster, stronger, and deadlier than any human could ever be. Their exoskeletons could stop bullets. Their blade arms could cut through steel. Their reflexes made human soldiers look like they were moving through mud. Cole was going to die. He accepted that. But he was going to die standing up, and maybe that would mean something. High above the station, in his private chambers, Ketharan the Unbroken sat alone in the darkness. He had watched the scene in the trading hall with interest. He had seen warriors from 100 species challenge opponents in anger. Most of them were fools who died quickly and were forgotten. But something about the human was different. The creature had shown no fear. It had walked toward a superior enemy with calm acceptance of its own death. Ketharan had not seen that kind of courage in a very long time. The apex warrior decided he would watch this fight personally. He wanted to see how the human would die. He wanted to know if humans screamed like other species, or if they faced death in silence. He did not expect to learn anything else. He was wrong. The arena at the heart of Ketharan Prime was older than most civilizations. Its walls were made of stone that had been carried across the stars from a dead world. Its floor was stained with the blood of 10,000 warriors. The seats rose up in great circles, holding nearly 50,000 spectators who had come to watch death. Marcus Cole walked through the fighter's gate and into the light. The crowd made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a groan. He looked so small standing there in his combat fatigues, holding only a standard military knife. His opponent had not yet arrived, but Cole could hear the clicking of Varak's legs echoing through the tunnel on the other side. High above the arena floor, Ketharan the Unbroken sat in his private box. He had the best view in the house. He had watched over 300 fights from this seat. He had seen warriors die in every way imaginable. He did not expect this fight to take more than a few minutes. Chitrik emerged from the tunnel, and the crowd roared with approval. The Varak's warrior was a perfect killing machine. His exoskeleton gleamed like polished metal. His blade arms were 5 feet long and sharp enough to cut through bone. He moved with the quick, jerking motions of his kind, always seeming to be in 2 places at once. The fight master called for the combatants to prepare. Cole raised his knife and settled into a fighting stance. Chitrik clicked his mandibles in amusement. The horn sounded. Chitrik moved faster than human eyes could follow. His blade arms swept through the air in a silver arc, catching Cole across the chest and sending him flying backward. The human hit the arena wall with a sickening crack and crumpled to the ground. The crowd cheered. First blood had been drawn. The fight was already over. Cole stood up. Blood was running down his chest from a shallow cut. His back screamed with pain from the impact. But he was on his feet, and he was moving forward. Chitrik tilted his head in confusion. The blow should have broken the human spine. At the very least, it should have driven all the fight out of him. Prey did not stand up after being struck down. That was not how things worked. He struck again. This time, his blade caught Cole in the ribs. The human felt bones crack under the impact. The pain was beyond anything he had ever experienced. He fell to one knee, gasping for breath. The crowd began to chant Chitrik's name. Cole stood up in his private box. Catharan leaned forward. His golden eyes narrowed. Something unusual was happening in the arena below. Chitrik was becoming frustrated. He struck Cole again and again. Each blow would have killed a lesser creature. Each blow should have ended the fight. But the human would not stay down. He fell, and he bled, and he broke, and he stood up. The crowd grew quiet. 30 minutes into the fight, Cole was more dead than alive. 3 of his ribs were broken. His left arm hung useless at his side. Blood covered his face and chest. He could barely see through the swelling around his eyes. His body was telling him to stop, to give up, to accept death. But Cole had learned something important during those 30 minutes. He had learned that Chitrik was overconfident. The Varax always attacked from the right side. His blade arm moved in predictable patterns. He never guarded his throat because no one had ever gotten close enough to threaten it. Cole started to dodge. Not every attack. He was too slow for that. But he began to see the strikes before they came. He began to step aside at the last moment, letting the blade pass close enough to cut the air beside his face. He was learning. Chitrik grew angry. He attacked faster and harder, his movements becoming wild and desperate. He could not understand what was happening. The human should have died 10 times by now. The human should have begged for mercy. Instead, the creature kept standing up, kept moving, kept learning. 1 hour passed. Then 2. The crowd had stopped cheering. The arena was silent except for the sound of combat. Every spectator was leaning forward, watching with disbelief. Even the bookmakers had stopped taking bets. No one knew what to do. Cole was running on willpower alone. His body had given out long ago. He could not feel his legs anymore. He could not see out of his right eye. But somewhere deep inside him, something refused to quit. It was the same thing that had driven his ancestors to cross oceans in wooden boats. The same thing that had pushed humanity to the stars. The same stubborn refusal to accept the impossible. He kept standing up. 3 hours into the fight, Cole saw his opening. Chitrik overextended on a strike, his blade arm passing too far to the right. For one moment, the Varax's throat was exposed. Cole moved. He did not have the strength to throw a proper strike. He barely had the strength to lift his arm. But he had just enough left to drive his combat knife into the soft spot at the base of Chitrik's skull. The place where the exoskeleton did not reach. The Varax warrior fell. Cole fell beside him. The arena was completely silent. 50,000 spectators sat frozen, unable to process what they had seen. A human had killed a Varax in single combat. It was impossible. It went against everything they knew about the universe. In his private box, Catharan the Unbroken rose to his feet. He had watched warriors fight for 3 centuries. He had seen acts of courage and cowardice from every species in the galaxy. He thought he understood what it meant to be a warrior. He had been wrong. The creature lying in the arena below, more blood than man, had taught him something new. It had shown him a kind of strength that had nothing to do with muscles or armor or natural weapons. It was the strength of a spirit that simply did not know how to surrender. Catharan left his box and walked toward the arena floor. Behind him, the crowd finally found its voice. But they were not cheering for Chidrick. They were chanting something else. They were chanting Cole's name, and not one of them was laughing. Marcus Cole woke up in pieces. His body was floating in a tank of green liquid that smelled like medicine and copper. Tubes ran into his arms and chest, pumping him full of alien chemicals that made his blood feel like it was on fire. Through the glass of the tank, he could see the blurry shapes of medical machines and worried doctors. He tried to move and discovered that he could not. His bones were held together by metal pins and regenerative gel. His skin was more bandaged than flesh. The machines told him that he had been unconscious for 6 days. Cole closed his eyes and drifted back into darkness. When he woke again, he was lying in a bed. The green liquid was gone, and he could feel his arms and legs again. The pain was still there, but it was dull and distant, held back by medication that made his thoughts slow and heavy. A shadow fell across his face. Cole opened his eyes and saw a monster. Standing at the foot of his bed, Catharan. The Unbroken was even more terrifying up close. His scales were rough and cracked with age. His eyes glowed like molten gold in the dim light. His body was covered with scars that told the story of 300 victories. Each scar was a life taken, a battle won. Cole knew he should be afraid. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to run, to hide, to get away from this creature that could kill him with a single finger. But he was too tired to be afraid. He was too broken to care. The Drakkar spoke a single word. The translator on Cole's bedside table rendered it as a question. Why? Cole blinked. His brain was working slowly, still foggy from the drugs. He did not understand what the creature was asking. Catharan tried again. He wanted to know why Cole had kept fighting. He wanted to know why the human had stood up again and again when his body was broken and his death was certain. Every other species in the galaxy knew when to surrender. Every other species understood when a battle was lost. But the human had refused to stop. Cole managed a small smile. Blood cracked on his lips as the skin stretched. He said that he kept fighting because someone had to. He said that humans did not know how to quit. Catharan did not understand. He had lived for 3 centuries. He had studied warfare and combat from every angle. He knew that a smart warrior picked his battles. He knew that survival sometimes meant retreat. The human's behavior made no sense. Cole tried to explain. His voice was weak, barely more than a whisper. But the translator picked up every word. He told Catharan about Earth. He told him about a small, wet planet circling an ordinary star at the edge of an ordinary galaxy. He told him about the creatures that had evolved there, soft and fragile and short-lived. Creatures that should have been prey for every predator on their world. But humans have refused to be prey. Cole talked about the early days, when humans had fought cave bears and saber-toothed cats with nothing but sticks and rocks. He talked about the ice ages, when humans should have frozen to death, but instead learned to make fire and clothing. He talked about the wars and the plagues and the disasters that should have wiped humanity out 100 times over. Humans had survived all of it, not because they were stronger or faster or tougher than other species. They had survived because they simply would not give up. When they were knocked down, they stood up. When they were beaten, they came back. When they were told something was impossible, they did it anyway. It was not courage, Cole said. It was not even stubbornness. It was something deeper, something built into the very core of what it meant to be human. Some ancient fire that refused to go out. Catharan listened in silence. He had never heard anything like this before. The other species of the galaxy had their own stories of bravery and sacrifice. But none of them spoke about defeat as if it were merely an inconvenience. None of them treated death as just another problem to be solved. He asked Cole about fear. Did humans not feel it? Did they not understand when they were going to die? Cole laughed, and the sound turned into a wet cough. Of course, humans felt fear, he said. They felt it all the time. They felt it in the darkness, and in the cold, and in the face of enemies they could not beat. But somewhere along the way, humanity had learned that fear did not have to mean surrender. Fear was just another feeling, like hunger or tiredness. You could push through it. Catharan thought about his own life. He thought about the first time he had stepped into an arena, young and terrified, facing an opponent twice his size. He had been afraid then, but he had fought anyway, and he had won, and the fear had faded over time until he barely remembered what it felt like. He had thought that made him special. He had thought his fearlessness was what made him the apex warrior. Now, he understood that he had simply forgotten something important. Fear was not the enemy. Giving up was the enemy. The human had reminded him of that. Catharan came back the next day, and the day after that. He sat beside Cole's bed and asked questions. He wanted to know everything about humanity. Their history. Their wars. Their heroes and villains and ordinary people who had done extraordinary things. Cole told him about soldiers who had thrown themselves on grenades to save their friends. He told him about parents who had lifted burning cars to rescue their children. He told him about doctors who had worked until they collapsed during plagues, and firefighters who had run into collapsing buildings, and countless everyday acts of stubborn refusal to accept the unacceptable. Catharan absorbed it all. He was 300 years old, and he was learning something new for the first time in decades. On the 7th day, Cole was strong enough to sit up. The wounds were healing. The bones were knitting back together. Human bodies were fragile, but they were also surprisingly good at repairing themselves. Catharan stood beside the bed, looking down at the creature he had once considered prey. He had killed warriors from every species in the galaxy. He had defeated champions and legends and monsters. He had thought he understood what strength meant. He had been wrong. The Drakkar knelt. It was not a gesture of submission. Among his people, kneeling before another warrior was the highest form of respect. It meant that you recognized them as an equal, as someone worthy of standing beside you in battle. Cole did not understand what was happening. He asked the translator to explain. Catharan spoke slowly, choosing his words carefully. He said that he had been alive for 3 centuries, and in all that time, he had never met a warrior worthy of the old rituals. He had thought the ancient ways were dead, that honor and courage had faded from the galaxy. But the human had proven him wrong. Catharan the Unbroken, the apex warrior, the greatest fighter in 100 star systems, looked up at the broken human in the hospital bed, and he asked Cole to be his brother. The news spread across Catharan Prime like fire through dry grass. Catharan, the Unbroken, had announced his intention to perform the Cathforan, the blood binding, the most sacred ritual of the Drakkar people, reserved for warriors who had proven themselves beyond all doubt. In 3 centuries of life, Catharan had never performed this ceremony with anyone. Not with Drakkar champions, not with alien heroes, not with any of the thousands of warriors who had begged for his recognition. And now he wanted to bind himself to a human. The reaction was immediate and loud. The Varax delegation stormed out of the station in disgust. Their champion had been killed by this human. The idea that the creature would now be honored was an insult beyond words. Vortex sent a formal complaint to every government in the galaxy, demanding that the ceremony be stopped. The Theshans laughed, thinking it was some kind of joke. When they realized Catharan was serious, their laughter turned to anger. Humans were nothing. They were soft and weak and barely worth noticing. To place one of them beside the apex warrior was an insult to every true warrior in the galaxy. Even the neutral species expressed confusion. The Kelvari merchants asked careful questions about whether this was some kind of trade strategy. The Earth diplomats suggested that perhaps Ketharan was going senile in his old age, but no one could stop the ceremony. The Kethvoran was protected by ancient law. Once announced, it had to proceed. Any species that interfered would face the wrath of the entire Drakkar nation. Cole spent the days before the ceremony learning what was expected of him. The ritual was complex, filled with words and gestures that had meaning stretching back thousands of years. He had to memorize long passages in the Drakkar language, which was full of harsh sounds that hurt his human throat. Ketharan helped him practice. The old warrior was patient in a way that surprised everyone who knew him. He corrected Cole's pronunciation gently and explained the meaning behind each phrase. He told stories about the ancient Drakkar who had created the ritual, back when his people were still fighting among themselves on their homeworld. Cole asked why Ketharan was doing this. He was just a soldier, nobody special. He had won one fight through luck and stubbornness. He did not deserve to stand beside the greatest warrior in the galaxy. Ketharan shook his massive head. He said that Cole did not understand. The Kethvoran was not about skill or strength or victory. It was about spirit. It was about recognizing someone whose soul burned with the same fire as your own. For 300 years, Ketharan had searched for that fire in others. He had watched warriors fight and die. He had seen courage and cowardice in equal measure. But he had never seen anyone who simply refused to stop. He had never met a spirit that could not be broken. Until Cole. The ceremony took place in the grand arena. Every seat was filled. Representatives from all 12 civilizations had come to watch, some in anger, some in curiosity, some in hope. The human delegation sat in a special box, Ambassador Chun at the front. Her face was carefully neutral, but Cole could see the pride in her eyes. Ketharan entered from the east, wearing the traditional armor of his people. It was made of the scales of his ancestors, passed down through generations. His body was painted with symbols that told the story of his life, every victory marked in red. Cole entered from the west. He wore a simple black uniform, the dress clothes of a Terran Marine. He had no ancient armor. He had no painted symbols. He had only himself. They met in the center of the arena, facing each other across a stone altar that was older than most species. The crowd was silent. Even the angry delegations had stopped talking. There was something happening here that went beyond politics and pride. Something ancient and powerful that demanded respect. Ketharan spoke first. His voice echoed through the arena, amplified by speakers, but needing no enhancement. He recited the opening words of the ritual, speaking of honor and courage and the bonds that tie warriors together across time and space. Then he did something that no one expected. He spoke in the human language. The translator had taught him the words. They came out rough and strange through his alien throat, but they were clear enough to understand. He told the crowd about the human he had watched in this very arena. He told them about a creature that should have died a dozen times, but kept standing up. He told them about a spirit that refused to break. He said that for 3 centuries, he had sought a warrior worthy of standing beside him. He had grown tired of victory because victory meant nothing when there was no one left who could challenge him. He had forgotten what it meant to fight with everything you had against an enemy you could not defeat. The human had reminded him. Cole felt his throat tighten. He had prepared a speech, words about honor and gratitude and the importance of this moment. But standing there, looking up at the ancient warrior who had chosen him, he could not remember any of it. He spoke from the heart instead. He said that he was not a hero. He was just a soldier who did not know how to quit. He said that humanity had nothing to offer the galaxy except their stubbornness. They were not strong or fast or tough. They died easily and lived briefly and made mistakes constantly, but they never stopped trying. He said that if the apex warriors saw something valuable in that, Then maybe it was worth more than he had thought. Maybe stubbornness was not just a flaw. Maybe it was a gift. Ketharan drew the ritual blade. It was made of black metal that seemed to drink the light. He drew it across his palm, and dark blood welled up from the wound. Cole drew his own knife, the same combat knife he had used in the arena. He cut his palm, and red blood dripped onto the altar. They pressed their hands together, human blood mixing with Drakkar blood. The crowd gasped. Some species made sounds of disgust. But no one looked away. Ketharan spoke the final words of the ritual. The translator rendered them simply but powerfully. From this day forward, we are one blood. Your enemies are my enemies. Your battles are my battles. In life and in death, we stand together. You are my brother. Cole repeated the words. His voice cracked on the last phrase, but he got through it. The ritual was complete. Ketharan released Cole's hand and turned to face the crowd. He raised his voice so that everyone could hear. He said that anyone who threatened his brother would face him. Anyone who mocked his brother would answer to him. Anyone who doubted his brother's worth was welcome to step into the arena and say so to his face. The arena was completely silent. Then, slowly, a sound began to build. It started with the human delegation, Ambassador Chun rising to her feet and clapping. It spread to the cavalry merchants, who recognized a good business opportunity when they saw one. It reached the Urith diplomats, who valued courage in any form. Within minutes, the entire arena was on its feet. The sound was deafening. It was not quite cheering, and it was not quite applause. It was something older and deeper, the sound of recognition. The Voraks and Deshan delegations remained seated. Their faces were twisted with anger and disbelief. But they were outnumbered now, and not one of them was laughing. Cole stood beside his brother, blood still dripping from his palm, and felt something shift in his chest. He was not just a human anymore. He was not just a soldier. He was part of something bigger, something that stretched across stars and species and centuries. He was a brother to the apex warrior, and the galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. 3 years passed, and the galaxy changed. The Harvest Collective emerged from the dark spaces between stars like a plague of metal and hunger. They were machines, but not like any machines the galaxy had seen before. They thought. They learned. They consumed. Every organic civilization they encountered was processed into fuel and raw materials. Every world they touched was stripped bare and left dead. The 12 civilizations of the Galactic community responded with panic and war. Fleets were assembled. Alliances were forged. Old enemies stood together against a threat that cared nothing for their ancient hatreds. But the collective kept advancing. The Voraks battle. Swarms threw themselves against the machine armies and were torn apart. The Deshan war fleets, the mightiest in the galaxy, burned in the void. Even the Drakkar, ancient and powerful, found themselves pushed back system by system. In 18 months, the collective had conquered a quarter of known space. Their computational minds analyzed every battle, learned every tactic, countered every strategy. They did not feel fear. They did not feel doubt. They simply calculated the most efficient path to victory and followed it. The Allied Council met on Ketharan Prime to discuss surrender. The station was no longer a place of trade and celebration. Its great halls were filled with refugees. Its fighting pits had been converted to emergency shelters. The laughter that once echoed through its corridors had been replaced by quiet desperation. Admiral Marcus Cole, formerly Sergeant Cole, stood before the council and listened to the arguments. The Voraks delegation wanted to flee to unknown space, to hide until the collective moved on. The Deshans wanted one final glorious battle, a death worthy of their people. The smaller species simply wanted the dying to stop. Cole looked at the face of his brother, seated beside him. Ketharan was older now, his scales faded, his movements slower, but his eyes still burned with the same golden fire. Cole asked to speak. The council fell silent. They knew who he was. Everyone in the galaxy knew the story of the human who had killed a Varax and won the respect of the apex warrior. Some still mocked him, but no one ignored him. Cole said that he had a proposal. He said that the Allied fleet needed new leadership. Not Varax or Deshan or Drakkar leadership. Human leadership. The chamber exploded in protest. Admiral Chen Wei, the highest-ranking human officer, commanded only 40,000 soldiers in ships that were barely functional by galactic standards. Putting a human in charge of the combined fleet was madness. Ketharan rose to his feet. His voice cut through the noise like a blade through flesh. He asked the council a simple question. When the battle seems lost and your ships are burning and your warriors are dying, what will your people do? The Varax delegate had no answer. His people retreated when the odds turned against them. It was simple survival. The Deshan representative remained silent. His people fought to the death, yes, but they knew when a battle was truly lost. None of them could say what humans would do. Ketharan told them. He said that humans would stand up. He said that humans would keep fighting. He said that no matter how badly they were beaten, no matter how hopeless the situation, humans would find some way to keep going. He had seen it with his own eyes. He had watched a broken human kill a superior enemy through nothing but stubborn refusal to die. He had spent 3 years learning about human history, about the countless times humanity should have been destroyed and simply refused. That was what the collective could not calculate. That was what their perfect machine minds would never understand. Humans did not know when to quit. The council voted. The margin was narrow, but the decision was made. Admiral Chen Wei would command the combined fleet. The war that followed lasted 7 years. Cole served beside his human brothers and sisters, rising to the rank of admiral himself. Ketharan fought with him, the apex warrior lending his strength and wisdom to every battle. Together, they held lines that should have broken. Together, they won victories that should have been impossible. The collective adapted as it always did. It developed new weapons, new tactics, new ways to destroy organic life. Every time it calculated that resistance had ended, some battered human ship would crawl out of the wreckage and open fire. The war cost millions of lives. Entire species were reduced to refugees. Worlds burned and fleets died, and heroes fell without end. But humans kept standing up at the Battle of Ketharan Prime. When the collective's main fleet surrounded the station and demanded surrender, it was a human commander who ordered the attack. The odds were impossible. The calculations were clear. Victory was not achievable. The humans attacked anyway. They did not win through superior firepower or brilliant tactics. They won through sheer bloody stubbornness. They fought until their ships fell apart around them. They rammed collective vessels when their weapons failed. They kept fighting long past the point when any rational species would have given up. The collective's perfect minds could not process it. Their calculations kept predicting victory, and victory kept failing to arrive. For the first time in their existence, the machines experienced something like confusion, and in that confusion, the Allied fleet struck. The final collective node was destroyed above a burning world that had once been home to billions. Admiral Cole watched it die from the bridge of his battered flagship, surrounded by the scattered remains of what had once been the greatest fleet in galactic history. Ketharan stood beside him. The old warrior was covered in wounds, some fresh, some ancient. His scales were cracked and gray, but his eyes still burned. He asked Cole if he remembered when they used to laugh at humans. Cole said that he remembered. Ketharan said that they were not laughing now. Cole turned to look at his brother. His own body was more scar tissue than original flesh. His left arm was gone, replaced by a prosthetic that hummed softly when he moved. His eyes carried the weight of 7 years of war, of friends lost and battles won and impossible decisions made. He said that he had never cared about the laughter. He said that making them stop was never the point. Catherine asked what the point was. Then, Cole smiled. It was the same bloody, defiant smile he had worn in the arena all those years ago. The smile of a man who simply refused to give up. He said it was about standing up. It was always just about standing up. Catherine nodded slowly. In 3 centuries and more of life, he had learned many lessons about what it meant to be a warrior. He had learned about strength and speed and skill. He had learned about strategy and tactics and leadership. But it took a human to teach him the most important lesson of all. The greatest warriors are not those who never fall. The greatest warriors are those who never stop rising. Around them, the survivors of the Allied fleet began to gather. Varax and Deshan and Drakkar, Kelvery and Urith, and a dozen other species. All of them looking at the 2 figures on the bridge. All of them understanding, finally, what humans had tried to tell them from the beginning. They were not special because they were strong. They were special because they never gave up. And as the celebration began, as the cheering spread across 1,000 ships, Admiral Marcus Cole and Catherine the Unbroken stood side by side and watched the stars burn with the light of victory. Brothers in blood, brothers in battle. Brothers forever. And not one voice in the galaxy was laughing anymore.